Alright, you guys, we're going to be looking at 7.2 in our Chapter 7 notes on page 5. So if you'll make sure you're turned to there, you're looking at this page, and we'll get ready to go. So we're going to be looking at describing populations. So yesterday we talked about samples versus populations. We talked about how with a sample we need to make sure that it is unbiased and that it's large enough, and that if that's the case, then we can make predictions for the population, and that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so that's our goal, is understand the validity of samples of a population, and then use multiple random samples to determine the outcome for that population. So here in example 1, we have a situation here. It says you and a group of friends want to know how many students in your school prefer pop music. Okay, that's going to be our event that we're looking at. There are 840 students in your school, so this is the total population. This is the population. Each person in the group randomly surveys 20 students, so this is going to be our samples because it's part of the population. The table shows the results. Use the sample to make an estimate for the number of students in your school who prefer pop music. So we want to reread that again. It says use each sample to make an estimate for the number of students in your school. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use each one of these samples, so you and 4 friends, and we're just going to look here at pop. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and organize our work here. We've got you, we've got your friend A, your friend B, friend C, and friend D. Okay? And so we're making predictions about the population based off of each sample here. Okay? So we did this yesterday, back up when we talked about, let me find it from yesterday, here, when we were finding the total population for watching one movie, how we set up our ratio box. We're going to do the same thing for each sample here. So if I set it up and I think about it as a ratio box, okay, we still have our part to whole situation taking place, or our event over our total. And this is the sample side, and this is the population side. So when we go back to our sample, the whole amount, or the total amount of students that we surveyed from our sample, was 20. The part we're looking at is pop music. So under me, you, there are 13 students who like pop music. Well, I want to see what it's like for the whole population. So there's 840 students in the total population. We want to know what part of that 840 will probably like pop music. So from there, we just solve our ratio box. We cross multiply and we divide. And we get that there's 546 students for just your sample, based off of your sample. We want to do that for each friend. So you can do it along with me as I do it. So friend A, if I make my ratio box of part to whole, this is my sample, this is my population. There's a total of 20 children in our sample. The part for friend A is 8. So this part is not changing down here, just based off of the sample, okay, from friend A. So when we cross multiply and solve here, you should get 336. Friend B had 10 over 20. Over 20. And if we have 840 in our whole population, based off of friend C, there should be about 400, or friend B, I'm sorry, there should be about 420 here. Well, friend B and friend C are the same, so we can go ahead and write down the same number for them. And then friend D has 9 out of 20 compared to 840. So I cross multiply and I divide, which means there should be about 378. Okay? So based off of those numbers, we come here to part B. We want to describe the center and describe the variation. So when we're talking about center, we're talking about finding the mean and the median. And when we're talking about variation, we're finding the range. And so remember, range is the maximum minus the minimum. And so I can go ahead and find this one pretty easy. So we can go ahead and do variation. So the maximum is my biggest number, which was 546, minus my smallest number, which was 336. So we're doing it based off of the population, what we're predicting as population from each sample. And so when we subtract those two, the difference, or the range, is 210. There's a 210 difference in the different samples that we collected. Now we want to find the mean between the 5 different samples and the median. So the mean, remember, when we find the mean, we want to add up all the numbers. So we're going to add up the prediction from each sample. And then we're going to divide it by how many numbers that we have, which is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I divide that, I get a mean of 420. So on average, we can predict that 420 students would like pop. For our median, remember the median's the middle, so we have to put our numbers in order from least to greatest. So 336, 378, 420, 420, 546. And then we just go back and forth until we find our middle number, which is pretty close to my mean. So and the extra example 1 is very similar, and so what I want you to do here is I want you to do the same steps that we did here. I want you to do here on this one. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go through that same process that we just did. Okay, because this time you're looking at, you and your friends want to know how many students in your school prefer popcorn. That's going to be our event. So we're going ahead and we're just looking at popcorn. We can go ahead and highlight that. We're looking at popcorn. There are 500 students, so that's my population total in your school. Each person in the group randomly surveys 25 people, so there's my sample. The table shows the results. Use the sample to make an estimate of the number of students in your school who prefer popcorn. So that's where you're going to do the same thing. You're going to organize your work where you have you have friend A, friend B, and friend C. And you're going to find the prediction of the population based off of this. And then in part B, you're going to do the same thing that we did in example 1. You're going to find the center, and you're going to find the variation of each of these. Okay, and when you have done this, unpause the video and I'll show you the answers. Alright, so you should have gotten for extra example 1, you should have gotten these as your answers. So you need to pause the screen and check your answers and then fix anything that you may have gotten wrong. Okay? Alright, so going back to try it. This is based off of example 1 from over here, okay? So this information, you still need all of this information to answer here. And I want you to pause the video and I want you to try this one on your own. And it's the same exact process as example 1 and then the extra example 1. So pause the video again and I want you to solve for these. But this time, instead of pop, we're looking at wrap. So we should be looking at this column right here. Okay? Pause the video, and then when you unpause it, I'll have your answers. Alright, here we have the answers to the try it part. You need to pause the video and make sure that you have the same answers that I do for the try it. And then you need to make any corrections that you see fit. All right, moving on to example 2. So it's still the same, but this time instead of estimating using it multiple samples, this time we're going to be averaging to find a population. Remember, average is the same thing as the mean. So we need to be thinking in those terms. So it says you want to know the mean number of hours students with a part-time job work each week. At each school, you randomly survey 10 students with part-time jobs. Your results are shown. So how many, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 schools here. Okay, we went to 6 different schools and we randomly surveyed 10 different students at each school. It says use each sample to make an estimate of the mean number of hours students with part-time jobs work each week. Describe the variation of the estimates. So part A, we're just looking here at describing the mean, and then we're going to look at describing the variation. So that means we need to find the mean of each one of these. So what we need to do is we need to look at school A, and we need to add all these 10 numbers up, and then we need to divide by 10. And so when I add all those numbers up, you should get 70. Divided by 10 gives me 7. I'm going to do the same process for school B. I'm going to add all those up for school B. I get a sum of 73. I divide it by 10, and I get 7.3. School C, I do the same thing. Add it all up. I get a sum of 77 divided by 10. Gives me 7.7. For D, I add it all up. I get a sum of 50. I divide it by 10. And I get a mean of 5. And for school E, I add it all up. Get a sum of 80. Divide it by 10. I get a mean of 8. For F, add it all up. Got a sum of 90. Divided by 10. Got a mean of 9. So I should have done all of those things. Okay? I am looking for the variation. Remember, variation is the range. So that means I want to subtract the maximum mean minus the minimum mean. So the maximum mean I found was 9. The minimum mean I found was 5. So the variation or the range of means for this set is there's a 4-hour spread between the minimum and the maximum. In part B, it says use all 6 samples to make one estimate of the mean of the part-times. So if we want one estimate, we're going to have to find the mean of the means. Okay, so what that means is we're going to take all these means and we're going to add them together. And because we're finding the mean of the means, we're going to divide by how many means we have, which is 6. Which ends up giving me a decimal of 7.333, so we're just going to round it to 7.3 repeated. So we could say about the population of part-time jobs work about 7.3 hours is what we could say here. Okay. So example 2 is very similar to what we just did. It's just shorter. You just have 3 instead of 6 schools. But you're going to do the same process. But this time you're going to estimate and find one estimate, meaning you're going to do part B first. And then here you're finding the variation, so you do part A then, where you find the variation. So what I want you to do is I want you to try these 2 on your own, following the same steps that we did up here. I want you to try it down here, pause the video, and then once you have your answers, I want you to unpause the video and we'll look at the answers and see what we got. So this is what we should have gotten as our answers. We should have gotten these as our means for each of the data sets, and then the means of the means was 4.8. Our variation is the range, so when we subtracted the max minus the min, we got 1.1. Okay? Alright, so That's it. That's all we got. So from here, you should make sure that your notes are filled out. Go show the sub, make sure that you filled your notes out correctly. She's going to check off on that. If not, you're going to end up having to stay in for break to finish. And then you can work on your homework. I will see you later.